Now, my identity is that of a therapist. When I started making videos 7 years ago, that I was entering becoming a content marketer. And as a content marketer, you're concerned with marketing. You are a business person, you're an entrepreneur. And yes, you develop content. You have to create good content and content that has value. And you give it all away for free, and kind of like, well, if you give it all away for free, then you'll create a product and some people will purchase your product and one day that you'll get paid. That whole dynamic, that imbalance of just give it away, give it away. There's that song, Give It Away Now. It is creates a one-sidedness, which is very much similar to a lot of attachment trauma, attachment dynamics of insecure attachment is this imbalance around the equality of giving and receiving. And for many of us, we know more the absence of relating. We know being offered crumbs. We know intermittent kind of attention. And so already to show up in a place where there's not really a personal connection because I'm talking to a piece of technology, my camera phone. And then there's a one-sidedness of give more, more, more. And then with social media, any kind of, Instagram, you're only as good as the post that you did yesterday. And within a rather short period of time, you immediately have to think about, okay, let's create another post, more, 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 more. And that is this bottomless pit aspect that many of us experience in relationships, especially if you have a core belief that you're not good enough. Then we get hooked into performance-based esteem where you have to keep proving that you're good enough and your worth is only based on the value that other people say that you have. And it's very much, like dance, monkey, dance. Come on, monkey, perform again. Now, all of this is completely unaware, is behind the scenes that, I don't think that the viewer wants this to happen, but that's the greater context of social media. One aspect of it, of course, it's not like that for everybody. But I've seen enough videos, I know enough people who've had anxiety attacks, who've had mental breakdowns, some people have had heart attacks. And it has to do with this hustle culture and never quite really getting any relational needs met because it has this really one-sided qualityness to it. So I bring all this up because this is the environment that I chose to be in as a content marketer, but my identity is that of a therapist. And I thought in the spirit of stories and telling stories, because even though I openly, I say I'm a therapist, don't really talk about, really share stories with clients or what kind of therapist that I am, which is so important to me. And one of the challenges is that my identity, I'm really not a content marketer. And later on near the end of this video, I do have what I call a big ask around help. And it relates to yes theory and putting myself out there. And I don't know if you know who Amanda Palmer is, and she's a musician, and she had a TED Talk, and it was all about how she really took a risk of asking her fans for help and support and to help her share her music and to have a broader reach. And it really required being vulnerable. And as a process, now in the examples that she gave, it was for like, hey, we're touring, and we need someone's couch to sleep on, and we need an extra bedroom. And then they'd get into a particular town, and someone would say, oh, by the way, I have a spare room. Would you like to stay? So for me personally, when I share where I'm at in the transition of my business and the view of like, well, what does this mean to continue to make videos? If I make videos, there's been so many times, should I, just delete my YouTube channel? Should I delete Instagram? Why am I doing this, And so back to this Amanda Palmer TED Talk, I'm not in the same position of saying like, oh, I hope you host me in your spare room, but I'm trying to look at asking for help in a way that creates more connection and not more isolation. And that's really what this process has been. And of course, let's acknowledge COVID has been very weird and isolating, and just the layers, the the normalization of being disconnected is the byproduct of COVID. I happened to live in Philadelphia a number of years ago, and I need new lenses in my glasses, so I called the manager of the eyeglass place, and I don't live near there, and I have to send my glasses. And the reason why I'm sharing this story, and I haven't spoken to him like in 4 years or something, but my life there was so different, of walking on the street and being immersed in community and, hey, how you doing, and waving. And I moved to a place where I'm more in my car. And then because of COVID, the isolation, there's just like not a lot of connection. And so over the years, becoming more and more isolated and more and more isolated. And I know I need to change something. And it really begins with looking at, well, how much do I align to continue to say I'm a content marketer, which is so necessary and needed? You need landing pages, you need funnels, you need a website, you need to build your list, you need to send out email broadcasts, you need to tag the people, you need to create products and say, hey, by the way, buy my product. That's a full-time job, and quite honestly, it's 8 full-time jobs. Oh, by the way, I'm going to create videos and create content and focus on presentation, and I'm a therapist on top of it, and I see clients. Trying to find the balance of that form of taking on, 8 jobs at once is really hard. It's been, quite honestly, really hard. And I don't gravitate my identity. I'm not a marketer. I'm just not. I've done well for myself as far as, good for me. I have no idea what I'm doing, and I got in there and did it. But just, it's not really, it's not a foundational infrastructure of a business that I really need to be sustainable and viable, so that I don't have a heart attack and lose my mind in the hustle culture of more and more and more and more and more. So as a therapist, I describe myself as there's different theoretical orientations. You study, you find out this school of thought and that school of thought, and you kind of are encouraged to pick a school of thought initially as a foundation. And then most people, as they pick and choose some of the main schools of thought, the main theoretical orientations, and put them together, and then we just say, I'm eclectic. Like everyone, it's very convenient. You say, well, I'm not totally this, I'm not totally that, but I'm part of all these things. And by the way, I'm eclectic. So I'm a contemplative psychotherapist. My training is in Buddhist psychology, and that was part of my training before I then transferred to also a more traditional university rooted in Western psychology. So I have this nice balance of Eastern psychology and Western psychology. And as a contemplative psychotherapist, it's really about nurturing the skill to observe my own mind, and to be able to stay present to the transitions between confusion and clarity, and to understand that the stories that we weave about ourselves are not necessarily true, and that we get all bent out of shape when life, the world, and others, and even we ourselves are not able to protect and defend the story of self the way that we are trying to manipulate the self to be. Now, does this sound familiar at all? The manipulation of self is very interesting with social media culture and branding, because I'm the brand, or any other kind of therapist who's on Instagram or makes YouTube videos. There is an awareness of, well, how am I presenting myself, and how is myself the brand, especially if I'm a business and growing a business. And it very easily we can manipulate how we want to be perceived. So as a contemplative psychotherapist, I'm strengthening my observer self. Usually this could be done in multiple ways, but a lot of it has to do with meditation and bringing a meditative, contemplative practice into one's life to observe, what do you notice now? What do you notice now? Can you stay here? Can you stay? Let's be present now. Let's take a breath. What about now? And strengthening our observer self in the very sometimes predictable shifts of mind, and sometimes the very chaotic up and down randomness of mind that just throws us for a loop. And that especially during moments of great confusion, or we might call extreme states of mind, or strong emotional waves that we start spinning and spiraling into states of confusion, are we able to find some center point, some place of, seeing the object, identifying within ourselves, well, where's the wisdom? Where's the calm abiding? Where is the focus? That even though there's a lot of drama and confusion around us, how are we able to also simultaneously stay grounded? And phrases like sit with, and phrases like be with, bear witness, to maintain your center so that you're not pushed over real easily. And the idea is that if I nurture and cultivate that quality within myself and observing how my mind is going all over the place, that it strengthens my ability to be a support and do the same thing for a client and or a client's mind. And that I'm able to stay present to the range and expressions of their suffering or their extreme states that get activated, or their confusion. So this aspect of being a contemplative therapist is about providing presence and surrendering into the moment. And my first therapist that I had, who offered such deep compassion and positive regard for me, it did translate and integrate that he loved me. And I was so fortunate to have a therapist who really enjoyed me and cared about me, and I felt loved. And a story, it turns out, I went to, part of my training is through Naropa University in the contemplative psychotherapy program. And it turns out that therapist I'm speaking of went to Naropa, and I didn't know this at the time, but he shared, or he had the same foundational tools available to him. He happens to be a dance movement therapist and works with somatic body-focused awareness, but still within the context of a contemplative practice. So one day I'm sitting on the couch, and like many of us, we come into therapy because our suffering has flared up. We are consumed by our suffering. There is a great confusion and just pain, just having a hard time. And needing to work through, how can I be there for myself? And he said one day he happened to notice the degree to which I'm fighting myself and fighting against letting in some truths, and the ability to surrender, but also the ability to let in help, to let him help, and say, Alan, you don't have to do it alone. And that's a bit of a recurring theme here of what I'm even talking about throughout this whole video, and knowing that I just can't keep doing everything alone as much as I keep perceiving that I need to. And he got up out of his chair. I'm on the couch, and because he's a dance movement therapist, incorporating some kind of body exercise was very, very common. Like, what I'm going to say was like not weird or anything, but he crouched down on the floor, and excuse me, I'm going to take a drink here real quick. He got down on the floor, and he invited my forearm, because I'm on the couch, my arm is like sitting on the couch, and he comes in and he says, can I have your arm? And I don't know if you've had a massage before, but you can experience this in a massage, that oftentimes the massage therapist really encourages you to say, just let go, just let go. And the massage therapist can manipulate and move your arm. So pretty much that's what Chris was doing. And he floated, I don't know if that's the right word, he floated my arm in his hands, and he just said, let go. He goes, I got you, let me hold you. I got you. give yourself permission to receive. You don't have to solve anything. You don't have to fight against it. Let's practice surrender and find the people, the places, the things, the energy, the concepts, the great mystery of healing. Find whatever it is that is holding you up, and that you can trust that. So that was really, really significant in my own healing work. And I'm still learning that lesson today. I'm still trying to surrender enough into trust how it unfolds. So that's an example of how Chris provided, really bearing witness, bringing a strong observer self to my process in order for me to realize I can do the same for myself. And then as a result of my training and becoming a therapist, realizing that that's what I can offer to others. I get asked every so often, like, when did I know I wanted to be a therapist, and how did I become a therapist? The short answer is I had a reoccurring experience. So I was introduced to comparative mythology and Joseph Campbell and Jung and archetypes and symbology and synchronicity, and just really paying attention to the symbolic communication and the multiple layers of myth, the mythological stories being played out simultaneously, and then this idea of the collective unconscious, and that there's pretty much, a finite number of stories, main stories, that just keep getting played out and played out and played out. So that trained me to just pay attention and to look at the world around me. And I would get on the bus, and this was in Chicago, and inevitably it was rather interesting because I would pay attention, and someone would just start talking to me. Strangers talk to me a lot, and I didn't necessarily initiate it, but I talk back. If someone says hi, I say hi, and then people would just tell me rather very personal things. And the thing I kept hearing was, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but... And then they tell the story, and then they just say, it's sort of weird. I just sort of trust you. I just trust share. I just felt I wanted to share that. Okay, thank you, stranger. See you next time. I created a video. It was one of the very first videos that I made. That I read this book, and it happened. It's a series of short essays, and it has to do with homosexual identity and what it means to be a gay person. And there was this one particular story, and I don't quite fully know if what I'm going to say is true, or what culture. I mean, I believe it's true, but I can't really reference it. But supposedly there's, I don't know if it's all of India, if it's certain aspect of India, certain expression, certain following particular religious beliefs. But the story was about that there's this cultural ability to go up to a stranger and say, will you be the face of God? And that the other person, the cultural training that everybody knows, is that you're just supposed to go, okay, sure, unless, I guess, if you're busy, you don't do it, or if you really think you can't. But in general, you say, yes, I can be the face of God. And then you sit on a park bench, and the person who asked then gets to talk to this idea of God through the face of the person who's sitting in front of you, and the person who it's their job to let God channel through them and to be the face of God, which is a metaphor for, will you please look at me with compassion? Will you please receive me with open arms? Will you allow me to share my deepest heartbreak? Because I don't know where to put it, and I'd really like the face of God to be able to normalize it. So that story always stuck with me, and then I had this awareness on a bus, a train, the subway. Strangers say, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I'm going to tell you this. So that very much was a driving force into the awareness of, I think I might, explore being a therapist. And then it was simultaneously, in the bigger sense, very much invested in my own personal healing process and healing work, and really involved and engaged in doing a number of things to work with my own heartbreak. It's like, it's like I had no choice. When you're cracked open and your heart is bleeding, you sort of say, I think it's a priority that I pay attention. Or we do just the opposite. We say, I think it's a priority to totally enter unconsciousness and completely distract and deny any awareness of this heartbreak. So that is some of the introduction to being a therapist. And then I'm a contemplative psychotherapist.